The file opens with the dull, metallic scrape of a naval clerk's drawer pulled open in haste, a sound preserved in memory more than in tape. The label on the folder is jagged, faded, written in pencil. SS Stephen Hopkins, Action Report, classified until war's end. Inside lies one of the unlikeliest combat stories of the Second World War. A battle fought not by destroyers or cruisers, but by a handful of merchant sailors aboard a cargo ship armed with a single small gun. The imagery opens on soldiers struggling in a haze of fire and dust, an echo of how the world looked in 1942. World War II raged on every front. Armies clashed across continents. But on the oceans, a different war unfolded, one fought by ships with no armor, no escort, and no real expectation of survival. Among these ships sailed the SS Stephen Hopkins, an American Liberty ship barely a year old, carrying cargo through the South Atlantic. She was supposed to be invisible, a neutral tonnage freighter moving quietly along remote sea lanes. Her job was simple: deliver supplies to Allied ports. She was not built for war, but war would find her. Tanks grinding across Europe appear next. They symbolize a world in which steel and fuel dictated strategy. Those supplies had to cross oceans, and merchant ships, slow, lightly armed, and vulnerable, became lifelines. Every one of them faced dangers from U-boats, mines, and German surface raiders disguised as merchantmen. One such raider was the Schiff 23 HSK-6 Stier, a powerful, heavily armed German auxiliary cruiser masquerading as a harmless cargo vessel. Stier carried 6 5.9-inch guns, torpedoes, anti-aircraft weapons, and a crew trained specifically to destroy Allied shipping. She had already sunk several vessels. A ship sinking flashes across the screen, an omen of what was coming. In the South Atlantic on September 27, 1942, the Stephen Hopkins sailed through heavy fog. Her captain, Paul Buck, relied on dead reckoning and luck. The crew consisted of American merchant marine sailors, Navy armed guard gunners, engineers, cooks, and even a teenage cadet named Edwin O'Hara, training for a future that fate would steal from him. Fighter planes appear overhead, but none were nearby on this day. The Atlantic was empty of Allied air cover. The Stephen Hopkins traveled alone across a battlefield with no front line, only the horizon. Bombed-out cities illustrate the war's brutality. Yet in the middle of that destruction, a single merchant ship and a single German raider would soon meet by chance in the drifting curtains of fog. Allied landings flash across the screen, scenes of armies advancing. But in the ocean war, there was only isolation. Ships fought alone or not at all. Civilians fleeing destroyed towns reflect the vulnerability of those aboard merchant ships. They had no armor plates, no watertight compartments, no medical corps. When they fought with courage alone. Radio operators tapping signals appear, symbolic of the brief confusion before the battle. At dawn, shapes materialized through thinning fog. 2 ships. One was a German supply vessel, the Tannenfels. The other, the disguised raider Stier, guns hidden behind false bulkheads. The Stephen Hopkins saw them first. Stier saw her seconds later. The fog lifted. Identities became clear. Both captains understood instantly. The German raider turned her concealed guns toward the unarmored American cargo ship. The Stephen Hopkins had no chance. She was outgunned by a factor of 20. But she would fight anyway. The next imagery, nurses tending wounded, foreshadows what came in the first minutes of battle. When the Stephen Hopkins opened fire with her single 4-inch gun, the recoil was so violent it shook the deck. Her first shells fell short. The Stier's return fire smashed into her bridge, killing Captain Buck and several officers instantly. Blood streaked the deck. Smoke poured into the sky. Fire erupted below. If the crew abandoned ship, the Steyr would sink them in lifeboats, as raiders often did. So they fought on. Generals studying maps appear next. On paper, the Hopkins should have surrendered. But her crew chose defiance. The Navy armed guard gun crew, barely trained, fired shell after shell. Engineers kept steam pressure alive despite flames creeping across the engine room. Sailors hauling ammunition did so under continuous shelling. Prisoners behind barbed wire reflect what would have awaited any survivors captured by the Germans. But the men aboard the Hopkins refused to let their ship die quietly. Propaganda newspapers flashed by. German broadcasts boasted of naval superiority. They had no idea that a merchant ship was about to do the impossible. Submarines glide into view, predators of the ocean. But on this day, the predator was the Steyr, and for the first time she would find prey that fought back hard enough to sink her. Winter battlefield images appear, harsh and unforgiving. The sea battle took on that same merciless quality. The Hopkins gun crew scored hits, real hits. One shell struck Steyr's steering gear, another pierced her engine spaces, a third hit a gun mount. The German crew, shocked, scrambled to keep up. Then came the moment burned into naval history. The Hopkins' 4-inch gun jammed. The gun crew lay dead or dying. Ammunition ran low. But one man, Cadet Edwin O'Hara, age 18, refused to give up. He loaded the last 5 shells manually. He fired all 5, alone, under direct fire. One shell struck Steyr's hull so hard that the German raider listed. Another triggered internal fires. The raider began to lose power. Victory celebration images flashed, the future hinted at, but in this moment both ships were dying. Berlin in ruins appears briefly, but in 1942 the Steyr was part of Germany's confident ocean raider program. Women in wartime factories appear, reminding us that Liberty ships were built quickly, cheaply, and meant to be expendable. Yet this one had become a weapon in her own right. Artillery images erupt, mirroring the cannon duel. Shells screamed across the waves. The Stephen Hopkins, her deck torn apart, her bridge gone, her engine doomed, refused to lower her flag. American and British officers planning major operations appear. Strategists who never imagined that a lonely merchant ship could take down a German warship. Then bombers soar overhead, the same types of planes the merchant marine kept supplied. Now, the climax. The Stephen Hopkins was sinking. Steam burst from ruptured pipes. Her deck was in flames. Her hull was torn open. The ship shuddered and began to list. But the Steyr was mortally wounded too. Fires raged uncontrollably. Her engines died. Her guns fell silent. The German captain ordered her scuttled to prevent capture. A Liberty ship, armed with one worn-out gun, had sunk a German raider. The Stephen Hopkins crew abandoned ship in lifeboats. Many were wounded. Some died of injuries, others drowned in the swells. The survivors drifted for 31 days across 2,000 miles of ocean before reaching Brazil, gaunt, dehydrated, half dead but alive. Only 15 of the 56 men aboard survived. The Steyr's crew was rescued by the Tannenfels. Only the wake of 2 lost ships remained. The Stephen Hopkins went down with her flag still flying. History recorded the event quietly. Merchant mariners received little recognition, but naval officers later stated plainly, no other merchant ship in WWII ever sank a German raider in a one-on-one gun duel. The Stephen Hopkins fought a battle she could not win, and won it anyway through courage, stubbornness, and the refusal of ordinary sailors to surrender even to overwhelming firepower. In a war filled with destroyers, battleships, and aircraft carriers, the most improbable victory sometimes came from a freighter with one gun, a teenage cadet, and a crew determined to stand against the impossible.